The base is dropped on another edition of Soccer Down here. It's January 29th. 2020 is a weird year so far. Overreaction Wednesday is not supposed to be a thing, but it's turning into a thing.
Yeah.
This is weird. I don't want overreaction every day, but that's what we're going to get today. Reports yesterday started to break in the afternoon, and they were not finalized because it hasn't been officially announced, but pretty well confirmed by the end of the day that Tito Villalba will be leaving Atlanta United, headed to, by most accounts here at the end of all this, Libertad in Paraguay. Now, I think there was a lot of wild and rampant speculation that got started yesterday about, well, no, they're going to go here, and it's going to be the players that have been rumored, and it's going to be a trade, and there's going to be a make-weight, and there was nothing to lead you to that. And the fact that that got going so deep was a little concerning because there was just, again, nothing to directly lead you to that. It's trying to connect dots that just might not be connected. And in this case, going to Libertad, they're not connected. Now, let's talk a little bit about Libertad and where they stand and why they might be interested to pull a move like this off. They're in the Copa Libertadores, first off, and they're in the group stage in a pretty manageable group to get to the knockout rounds later this year. They're in a group with Boca Juniors. That's a very tough draw for a Paraguayan club. They're in a group with Caracas FC out of Venezuela. Libertad should be favored there. And they're going to face one of the qualifiers coming through the qualifying rounds right now. It's a bit of a crapshoot. They could get a larger Argentine club. They could get a larger Brazilian club. They might not. So that's manageable. That's a draw that they can get through. Libertad's not a huge club, but getting to the knockout rounds of the Copa Libertadores is a lucrative venture. It's a big deal. And also the Paraguayan League is up for grabs, and Libertad has as good of a shot as anybody. So to be able to bring in a reinforcement like this is a big deal. And Tito Villalba, according to Doug Robertson, requested it. He not specifically Libertad, but he requested more playing time because he is trying to get into the Paraguayan squad fully. He's had a couple appearances, but he wants to be part of the Copa America squad this summer. He wants to be part of World Cup qualifying as it starts this year. He's got to be playing consistently to do that. And according to Doug's report yesterday, he requested an assurance of more playing time. And look, that's just not going to happen. And it's a little disappointing because I hoped that the Gressel deal could open up an opportunity for Tito to win the job and create that attacking front four that would have been really strong, especially if Tito gets back to the form that we saw here in 2017. That guarantee couldn't be made by the club that Tito would have that job. He's going to have to earn it because when you start to connect dots that I do think connect, and this is on the Atlanta side of things, I think you're going to see more of a 3-4-3 than maybe we thought this year. Let's go back to the 3-5-2 formation that Atlanta played late last year. When that formation included your two of Joseph Martinez and Ezequiel Barco, with Pity Martinez as the 10, it played much more like a 3-4-3. And I think a 3-4-3 that Frank de Boer wants to see this year. Because what that does is it gives you a lineup, honestly, similar to what you're going to see today in a behind closed doors friendly. Well, you're technically not going to see. Doug Robertson's going to see because he's there. Frank de Boer's going to see it. Other media who are on hand in Bradenton will see it. But the lineup is going to be Brad Kazan in goal, 3 center backs, Fernando Meza, Miles Robinson, Franco Escobar, wing backs of Brooks Lennon on the right side, Jake Mulroney on the left. It's a big opportunity for him on the left. George Bello, Edgar Castillo will be in that conversation. It's preseason. Don't flip out about guys not playing every minute of it or being with every group that plays every minute of it. Central midfielders right now, Eric Remedi, Emerson Hyndman, and that front three, Joseph, Barco, Pitti. So in that shape, if that's the idea, if that's kind of where you want your base to be, there's flexibility. You're going to see versatility with this group. You're going to see things move around. But if this is where you want to be, there's not as much of a spot for a Tito Villalba. And if you're not going to guarantee playing a specific shape that's going to give him the best opportunity to play, which would be a 4-3-3, I've never been a huge fan of him being up top with Joseph. I think they're too similar in that role. I think Villalba is best suited to play out wide on the right. He can play on the left. It's not his specialty, but he can do it. He can especially switch to it in matches to exploit a matchup. If you're not going to play a shape that's going to get the best of that because you feel like that is what we need to play in, no, you can't guarantee any playing time. And if Villalba's at the point where he has to have that playing time to get into the national team, and it's understandable where he is in his career and his age, he's going to want to go. And that's where you're at right now with a team that has been built very well from day one, but there are players who have been here from the first season who wanted more money or wanted more of a role, and you can't make those guarantees year after year after year. Sometimes that means things have to change. And that's where you're at. And I know it frustrates people and upsets people and then gets people feeling strong and typing big words on Twitter, and there's been some takes. But this is all part of the deal. And if players don't want to stay because of, they grew up here, they developed here, they're going to give that hometown discount that everybody's always looking for in these negotiations. Players aren't obligated to do that. And if they don't want to, then the club has to do what's best for the club. And that's where you're at. I thought it was a big opportunity for Tito Villalba this year. I thought he had an opportunity to earn a spot. And if he doesn't want to take that risk, because it is a risk. Look, it's a risk. You can't guarantee really anybody playing time. But if he doesn't want to take that risk, if he wants to go into a situation where he is much more likely to play and make that case for playing for Paraguay in the Copa America and in the World Cup qualifiers, hey, that's not going to be here. And it's a shame because Tito Villalba was the first. I think a lot of people associate him with being the first representation of what Atlanta United turned into. Young player from San Lorenzo who came here as a designated player, performed at an incredible way in 2017, scored two of the biggest goals in the club's history in 2017, let alone the one against the Red Bulls in the playoffs in 2018. He's had a number of big moments, and he's an emotional player, and you just love to pull for a guy like that. I remember meeting Tito when he was introduced here in Atlanta, and he was very shy, I think very tired because it had been quite a journey to get here. Very excited about the opportunity, but also you didn't really know what that was going to be. I mean, this was September of 2016. You had, I want to say, 4 or 5 players under contract at that point. Maybe. You didn't have a manager yet, although, Tata Martino was right around the corner. But it was a really interesting time, and this was the move that I think gave people a glimpse of what Atlanta was about to become. And that is hard to see go because I don't think the connection with the previous signings before Tito was there in the same way. Villalba was the face of the team in a lot of ways in 2017. that scrappiness, that fight, that hunger, all that came through in a big way. And it's hard to see leave. But you also have to be realistic when you look at this. Most people expected Tito Villalba to be gone by this point already because last year wasn't good. It wasn't. 2018 battled injuries. 2019 battled more injuries. Wasn't good. Didn't get consistency in health last year. In the early going in the 3-4-3, which played out a little bit differently than I think it did later in the year. He wasn't really a fit. He had a couple opportunities last year to cement some time, cement a spot. I think he had his biggest opportunity as a wingback at Yankee Stadium, and it was a bad day for Villalba. That's where you're at. So most people expected him to be moved on by now. That was the conversation coming out of 2019 season. Didn't happen. I thought a door opened, and it's a little disappointing to hear that. It came down to wanting to guarantee playing time. I totally understand it though from the player's role. He's trying to break into a national team. He's got to play to do that. If it's not here, he's got to play. And it gets back again to Villalba wanted guarantees of playing time. Can't be given to him. You want to do right by him, get him to a place where he can play. Julian Gressel wanted guarantees of more money. And we can argue and probably won't know for a couple of years if he was paid at market value, above market value, below market value. Signed a 4-year deal. It's going to be hard to judge it today. So he wanted more money. You couldn't guarantee giving him that, and he didn't want to wait till the CBA was done to see more of the big picture. So you did right by him. He moved on. And look, he said straight out that he wouldn't have felt comfortable playing here without knowing what was about to happen, without knowing the future. He wouldn't have been comfortable playing here. That's not good for the team to have that in the camp. So this is where you're at. LGP and Bocanegra talked about it. Leandro Gonzalez Perez wanted an opportunity to make more money, said if it came, he would be interested in hearing it out. You would assume that Tijuana was that opportunity. This is where you're at. Those are all players that I think Gressel was probably, because of the situation with the contract, the most obvious that this could happen. Didn't expect it with Leandro Gonzalez Perez. Most people speculated that it would happen with Villalba because of his role. So now when it all goes down, everybody is losing their minds at the moment, which is a shame. And look, in a perfect world, you're able to bring guys in before you do this, and you have to do this. You haven't been able to do that yet. And Frank DeBoer talked about it with Doug Robertson. The quote was really interesting. This morning's paper, he said, "Every penny has to turn around. Agents want more money suddenly, or we are really focused on a player and he goes in a different direction, and we have to go to plan B, and it's 1 or 2 weeks more." He said, most important thing is the midfielder. And that's been a consistent thread. I think some people are speculating now you have to go get a winger. I'm not quite there. I think you have enough cover, and if you're going to play a 3-4-3 in that way as your primary shape, you're not looking at the same kind of winger as Tito Villalba. You're not. So that central midfielder is what the club has identified, and it's what Frank DeBoer wants. That's going to be the push, and that hasn't changed. Last year it was anger that Pity Martinez was leaked and introduced before Miguel Almiron was sold about how complicated that can make it and how it could affect Atlanta's bargaining position and everything. Now when the deals don't happen ahead of the player leaving, it's anger about that. So it's a no-win situation, and it's hard to judge a whole offseason without that offseason being done. And even in MLS, it's harder to just judge it that way because the window stretches to May 5th. So there's still a lot of things to come, I would think, and there's still more moves to be made, and I think there's more players incoming. It's not going to be easy, as Frank DeBoer says. Look, it's a market. Things change. You're not talking about one club trying to buy one player and that's it. You're talking about one player having the opportunity to go to 4 or 5 different countries. Who knows how many clubs. It can get complicated. It can get weird. It can get difficult. You got to keep managing through it. And so far in Atlanta United's history, they've done a pretty good job of handling the market. So I'm still expecting that to be the same. I don't think they forgot how. It's going to be a challenge, and that's where you're at. But I don't think this dramatically changes anything in terms of the overall level, because a lot of people expected Villalba to be gone by now anyway. I think what it changes, and if you want to connect dots, what it tells you is you're going to see more 3 center back. You're going to see more 3-4-3/3-5-2/3-4-2-1, whatever you want to term it. You're going to see more of that, which means you're not going to see as much of traditional wingers. You're going to see wingbacks, but you're going to see a front 3 that is fluid, that is quick, that is creative. If it's Barco, Pitti, Joseph as your primary front 3, they can all pop up in different spots. And that's going to be really interesting to see. I'm excited about it because I liked it when we saw it last year, kind of later in the 3-5-2 run, after the team shifted to more of that 3-5-2. I liked that trio. And it's one that I think with time can be really, really strong. It's going to be an interesting preseason with the game today, with the game Saturday against Elfsborg from Sweden, the game in Birmingham, which will be available. Looks like Birmingham will have a stream of it, waiting on final confirmation there. We'll have radio coverage for sure on 92.9 The Game. There appears to be a game in Mexico, but we'll see what the details are of that. I think it was kind of obvious when the schedule was posted that you weren't traveling to go practice somewhere else for 3 days. You know, you're going to set something up, so hopefully that comes together. Could be behind closed doors, could be just a scrimmage, a complete scrimmage. There's no way to know yet, but expect something to come from that because it's another opportunity to prepare. And then you're into CONCACAF. And then, again, you have your MLS schedule that starts that is friendly with Nashville and Cincinnati as your first 2 opponents. So you've got some time to ease into this. You've got some time to build. You want to get these moves done as quick as possible. You want to get this midfielder in that Frank DeBoer has requested, that the club is looking for. You want to get that done as fast as possible. But you can't make any guarantees, and you can't force it. You've got to do the right deal for the long-term security of this club. There is no panic mode right now. And I know a lot of people disagree. That's fine. It's not panic mode time. You've got to get a deal done, the right deal. Not a bad deal because people are upset or people are freaking out. It's not how you do business. It's not how you build a club. That's my long-winded preamble. Sorry. We've got Mike Conti at 10 o'clock. We've got Felipe Cardenas at 10:30. So second hour is going to be packed. We're going to get to tweets now. We're going to get to Twitter now. We'll hit some news and stuff before we get to 10 o'clock. But I know there's a bunch of reactions. I know there's a bunch of people who probably completely and utterly disagree with what I said and are throwing things at whatever wall or out the window that's next to them. But go for it. It's all good. Let's hear what people are saying, John.
Well, first off, Jason, good morning.
Yeah, hey.
Nathan Pugh says he was looking forward to the Talk People Off the Ledge show today.
Yeah, I hate that that's a thing, but, you know, I it's just how I look at these things, honestly. You rarely see moves that should take you to a ledge. You know, it just, especially this one. I think honestly the most surprising move that's happened in the offseason is Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez. And maybe it didn't have this reaction because of that extended period where you were trying to finalize it and he was in Tijuana and you knew he was in Tijuana, maybe that mitigated the effect of it. I don't know. But that was the one that was the most unexpected. You know, most people expected Nagbe to go to Columbus, and that's what happened. He wanted to go home. He got to go home. Most people knew that there was a possibility of Gressel being traded or moving on because you're trying to do a new long-term deal that the player wants. And Villalba was one that most people expected to be gone at the end of the season, and it hadn't happened yet. So the most surprising one was Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez. I think the biggest reaction have been to these last two, and maybe it's because they're big moves 3 and 4. And again, Villalba played 900 minutes last year. I don't know if it's a big move. I hoped that would have changed this year, but there's no guarantees. And if he wants that for playing time, then he's got to go find that elsewhere.
KFC came in and said, surely this is the best way for Tito to get a shot at taking Paraguay to World Cup 2022 since 100%. He needs to play regularly and would be available for call-ups and training. They play Peru to start qualification on March 26th of this year, then Venezuela the 31st.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's the other challenge about South America is, yeah, Copa America is part of it, but World Cup qualifying starts in March. So he wants to be part of that squad. He's got to play. And if there's no guarantees here, then that's where you're at. And if the team's going to play more 3-4-3, which again I really liked, if you're going to play that, it's not as good of a fit for Villalba. It's not. So I want to see at Libertad, where he's going to get time in Libertadores, where he's going to get time in the Paraguayan League, I want to see how they use him. I would expect it would be as a right winger in a 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1. I think that's where he's best.
Cuppers/Alex, intellectually this seems like the right move, or at least it did going into the offseason when we still had Julian Gressel. Emotionally, this hurts again. This has to put pressure on to make a move. I know there's still time, but depth and quality are shrinking.
See, that's where I think you have to try to connect some dots that make sense. I don't think Gressel's role and Villalba's role in the way this team now is going to play. I think as its primary, not every single match, not every single minute, but as its primary shape, they're not the same role. In the 3-4-3, Gressel would have played the wing back. In the 3-4-3, Villalba would have played one of those front three roles, and it would have gotten kind of lopsided. It would have played more like a 3-4-1-2 as opposed to the 3-4-2-1, if that makes sense. We'll talk about it a little bit on stoppage time today with the whiteboard, but he's more in that position as a front runner up next to Joseph as opposed to dropping into the midfield and combining like Barco, like Pitti. So it's a very different look. And if that's not what's preferred, or you've worked on it in training, you don't like how it looks, well, then that's where you're at. Gressel wouldn't have played that role. So in the 3-4-3, in the 3-5-2, because they kind of flip 3-4-2-1 again, whatever you want to call it, they're different roles completely. If you were in a 4-3-3, that's where Villalba would have had the opportunity to take minutes from what Gressel would have had in a 4-3-3, because he would have been in the right winger. And I think when you take the lineup that DeBoer talked about with Doug, when you take these moves into account, when you look at kind of where things are now, you're pointing away from 4-3-3 and you're pointing more towards that 3-4-3, 3-4-2-1 type of shape. And then that just makes the whole conversation different.
But then let me ask you this. When it comes to all these different formation ideas, I think that it's safe to say don't get locked into an idea about a formation on any given match.
Formations suck. That's what I'm going to say right now. Formations okay. Suck because people get really riled up about it. Here's what you need to look for. Don't worry about the whole formation. Is it 3 center backs or is it 2? Is it a line of 4, which would be 2 center backs, 2 fullbacks that have far more defensive responsibility than 3 center backs and 2 wing backs? That's it. That's the only thing that matters. The rest of it, it's fluid. If you have 2 defensive midfielders, if you have 1, if you have 2 forwards who are up together as a pair, if you have 2 guys drop underneath the forward, it's all fluid. If you have a triangle in the midfield that has 1 back and 2 up, or 2 back and 1 up, or it flips and flops during the game, or it turns into a box of 4, it's the game. It's going to change. Like, that's just what it is. Atlanta typically has not played with a true pair up top. Now, you have the opportunity to do that this year, where you really haven't in the past, with Adam John and Joseph Martinez, if you want to go to that. I don't think it would be the primary option. It doesn't seem to be something that Frank de Boer really looked for last year a lot. It wasn't something that he tried to force with Vasquez or with Romario Williams early on. I don't think he'll go to that, but it is an option. So you can kind of rule that out as one of the things to look for of a pair up top. Because if I'm looking at a team for the first time, those are the 2 things I look at. How do they play in the back? 3 center backs or 2. How do they play up top? A true pair, which is not very common these days in the world of soccer. Or is it 1? Okay, everything else is going to rotate around that. So those are the things to look for. And, I mean, we're going to talk a lot this season. I'm already seeing it. 3-4-3, 3-5-2, 3-4-2-1, 3-4-1-2. What is it? Those are all pretty much the same thing. It's all about the number of center backs and the number of forwards. Those are the main things to look for. The rest is secondary.
Yes. Andy Hollums, with the transfer of Tito, we could probably use another attacker. Would Danny Houston be a good fit? And what are the chances San Jose would trade?
I have no idea if they would trade. I doubt they would. Why would you need another attacker? Because, again, this is assuming that you're going to play a 4-3-3 or you're going to play 2 up top, which we haven't seen much of. Houston is competing with Andres Rios, with Chris Wondolowski for time with San Jose. Want to see what kind of shape that Matias Almeida settles on. San Jose did get their center back from Mexico, Osvaldo Alanis. Chivas won CONCACAF Champions League with Almeida at Chivas, Mexican international, left-footed center back. It's a good addition. But their attack, it's competitive. You get past the holding midfield and you're talking about Vaco, you're talking about Carlos Fierro, you're talking about Cristian Espinoza, Magnus Eriksson, Andres Rios, Danny Houston, Chris Wondolowski. Shea Salinas is in this mix too out wide. That's a lot of competition for playing time. Could Houston be available? I don't know. There hasn't been any hint of that. Would he fit here? In a 4-3-3, he would, playing out on the right. If he played a pair up top, he would, pairing with Joseph Martinez. But again, that's not something that Joseph has a ton of experience in. It's not something this team's ever really looked for under Frank de Boer. So he'd be a nice addition because I like him as a player a lot. I don't know if he really fits where this team is headed. And I don't know if the price tag would be worth it because I don't think he'd come cheap.
Jacob Inman this morning, do we know the ROI Atlanta's getting for Tito, Gressel, Nagbe, LGP, etc.? That may be hard with a lack of info, but would be more comforting to see all these players leaving knowing it's good business for us. I trust the front office will reload. And then a separate question, do we have attacking depth?
All right, which moves are we looking for the ROI on specifically?
Tito, Gressel, Nagbe, LGP, etc.
Slow down. Go through each one because we can't talk etc. because we don't know etc. Each one, let's see what we know.
Yeah, I've heard etc. is a step slow this year. Gressel,
we know what the trade terms are. We don't know the specifics of the performance-based part of it. We don't know that. We do know that $250,000 was reported to be easily attainable, or soft performance targets might have been the actual words used. So we know that. But we know it was 650,000 in TAM in 2020, 100,000 in TAM in 2021, 250,000 in TAM was likely, and there's an extra 100,000 that we don't know how likely it is. And that 250,000 on performance stuff would, I would assume, come in 2021. Okay, who was
Nagby?
Nagby, we know that was 900,000 in TAM. And was that 375,000 in TAM with performance incentives? So 900,000, you've got 375. You don't know how much you're going to get, and I would assume it would be in 21 as well. So right now through those two, you got 1,550,000 in TAM now. And the potential for an extra 625 next year based off performance incentives, and you're getting a definite 100 next year based off the Gressel deal.
LGP.
Don't know. Hasn't been announced. Meza came from the same club. I would assume those moves were tied together because it would seem like that would help you from a salary cap perspective and a cost perspective. But we don't know, and there's no way to know. I don't think with the player being involved coming from the same club, and this is my speculation, I don't think there's going to be an additional GAM outlay from it. I don't think there's going to be a profit at the end of it that could be then converted to GAM. I just don't expect that to happen because you get reimbursed for your costs on the player first, and the reports were that it was around a $2 million transfer fee to Estudiantes for him back at the beginning of 2017. So I don't think you got a whole lot more than that. And when you take acquisition costs plus salary paid and you're getting that reimbursed off the top, that's probably taking most of the cash. So I don't think you're getting a GAM outlay. You're getting Fernando Meza. And I think a lot of people are just completely and utterly discounting Fernando Meza and what he can bring to the table here.
And then the Jacob question, which I know that you and Mike will get into on the whiteboard later on today. He just wants to know about having attacking depth. Do we have it?
Yeah, you have it. Here, I'm going to pull up my image of the whiteboard from last week with a depth chart in a 4-3-3. And I think it's going to be a little bit different. We'll do a 3-4-3 specific one. What's changed? You've taken out an option on the right side in Villalba, and you've taken out an option on the left side, which was less likely in Villalba. You've added, since we did that, Mulroney, who can play on either side and can give you option as wingbacks. So I was okay with the depth before. If you're going to go more 3-4-3, it's a different conversation. It's a different kind of depth. Now, what that means will be that in those, if you're playing 3-4-3 and it's Pitti and Barco playing in the kind of tucked in behind Joseph to where it's 3-4-2-1. I hate formations, and we're going to have to talk about it a lot all year. I know this.
Yes.
Hyndman can play in one of those two roles. He can play in one of the central midfield roles behind that as well. If you look at the central midfield as a box, for example, Hyndman can play any of the four spots. Remedi, I think, can play any of the four spots. So you've got guys in that kind of shape where it changes in terms of attacking depth and where it is. You've increased some depth in some other areas. Now, what I wonder, and we'll have to see when a signing gets made in that central midfielder that everybody's looking for, is it going to be a player who can play in all four spots in that kind of box? Is it going to be a player who is limited to the more holding roles or the more attacking roles? I would probably think if they're limited, they would be more limited to the holding roles. But if you get somebody who can step up and play higher, it just opens up more doors and it opens up more possibilities. If you get somebody who can step into the attack and help with the attack, well, then you've changed your depth in the attack, because then you could play three central midfielders together if one can step up and really contribute to the attack. I think Hyndman can. But if you get a new player who can do that as well, then you're just increasing options. And it can get really interesting in the way you play. So it's going to be fluid. You thought last year at times it was fluid. It's going to be fluid this year, it looks like.
Nathan Pugh back in this morning. He says the front office still has plenty of time to use funds, manipulate, and change the roster. And this is a spinoff of the earlier question. So do we really know how much TAM, GAM, and cap space Atlanta has now? Do the math for me, Jason. I'm lazy.
You won't know the cap space. And that's the hardest thing about it. And that's one thing that leads to the massive freakouts is there's no way to know the cap space. You don't know all of the cap hits because you don't know all of the transfer fees that are paid. You don't know how long they're spread out. You don't know the length of every contract. There's no way to answer that question, and it's hard. Me looking at it, trying to take some educated guesses on it. I don't think this team sat on a whole bunch of allocation money last year. I think some people might jump to that conclusion because Darren Eales talked about it at the end of 2017 when Nagbe became available. I think that was different. I think that was related to your expansion outlay of allocation money. And they kept some in case of a rainy day, in case of something popped up, and it did. Nagbe was not expected to be available. Now, I don't think they were sitting on a stash of allocation money in 18 or 19 because, I mean, I'm going based off of what Arthur Blank said in 2014 and the way he's managed the Falcons. And I think the expectation that's had here is you're going to spend what it takes to win, period. And you've had a team that has been very strong, very good, and has won. You've done it in a different way. You haven't been as obvious about spending big as an LA Galaxy has and pushing the rules where you're stretching those loan that is it really a loan and was it really a free loan? You're not doing those. But were you paying a number of players pretty well? Yeah. Were you paying a number of players fairly decent transfer fees to get them in, paying their former clubs? Yeah, you were. So I think you were using a lot of allocation money to be cap compliant. And I think the moves this season also lend you to that outcome. You know, you had limitations in re-signing Julian Gressel. You had limitations in how much of a contract you could give Leandro Gonzalez-Perez. If he wanted a raise, how much could you go up? You had limitations. I would assume that's because you were pretty limited in where your cap was. So now, what we don't know what the cap is at the moment. We don't know what it will be in the CBA. And that's another big element to this. What we know is, at a minimum, they're sitting on $1.55 million in TAM right now. We know that. We don't know if there's any additional from the LGP move or anything else. I would not expect there to be any out of a Villalba move. I think that's going to end up being cash that is brought back, and you're basically reimbursing what you spent on Villalba as a designated player at the time. I think that's what it's going to end up being. That's MLS rules. Because I don't know what the transfer fee was to San Lorenzo. It's not reported. You know what his cap hit was, or his salary on file with the Players Association is probably the better way to put it, at $835,000. That was last year. So I don't think you're going to make, let's average it at $800,000 a year over 3 years. I don't think you're going to make that much to be able to reimburse that and then convert money to GAM after. I'm not expecting it. Maybe not. So when you look at the cap from last year, if you're close to being maxed out, again, this is all trying to make fuzzy math fit. Villalba was on $835 in salary. You were paying that down with some form of allocation money. So he's not going to be in that kind of spot this year. You know, LGP was in I'm trying to find it real fast. I don't know how much he was on last year off the top of my head, but it was another one that was allocation money bringing it down. 700-800, somewhere in that ballpark. Meza, is a TAM player. So he's being bought down. Is he making the same as LGP? I don't know. Did you save a little bit in terms of cap spots and allocation money spend? Maybe. But we won't know what his salary is listed at until the Players Association posts that April or May. So Heineman, we don't know what his number is. It's more than it was last year. Nagby's was 665 or so. So, yeah, is Heineman replacing Nagby in that kind of spot? Potentially in the ballpark. Could there be a little bit more spent? Yeah. Okay, that's what at this point. So right now, that you have 1.55 in TAM at a minimum, and you have whatever you would have spent on Villalba to make him roster compliant. You're not going to have to spend that, and you have whatever salary cap hit that he was on after allocation money bought it down, available to bring in somebody. Simple and easy. So that much right now. So you have a spot to work with, and you have allocation money to work with. You can go about as big as you can go with a non-designated player right now. That's what you know.
Clayton Poss, do you think we need to put more stock into Brooks Lennon being a starter with the Tito and Gressel moves?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think what it shows you is that in a 3-4-3, Escobar is preferred as a center back because he can play that role too, and that means Lennon is preferred as the first option on the right side. Are there others? Yeah, Mulroney can be one, and he's going to get a run out on the other side today, on the left side. Can you do other shapes? Yep, and you'll see different things. But in a 3-4-3, 3-4-2-1, 3-5-2, blah, 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 Lennon is the primary option as the wing back if Escobar is preferred as a center back. And that's where you're at.
B at the Elijah Willis this morning. Trying to be non-partial, but it's hard because Tito was my favorite player. With Julian's departure, I thought Tito had a promising season. Now right wing is another position lacking depth. CONCACAF Champions League was supposed to be serious this season. Now I'm not so confident we can compete.
This is what I would tell you about not being able to compete. One, Motagua is not the same level as MLS. It's just not. And it's not to disparage the Honduran League. It's just not. If Wesley Dacus goes into a key role for Motagua, that should tell you everything you need to know. He was an Atlanta United 2 player who was good last year. That's about it. He didn't look like a first-team player. That's the level you're talking about. Can you get better? Yeah, again, I think you're working on a signing, it seems like. It sounds like DeBoer wants one. There's rumors flying everywhere. Don't know how accurate they are, but there are things out there. So I don't think you're not trying to upgrade. And that's the assumption that seems to be the primary line after each of these moves. It's like, oh, you're just trying to not spend money and you're trying to not replace players. Why do you think that? And that's I have no idea. I honestly have no idea because you're reading part of the book, you're watching part of the movie and jumping to the conclusion that it's all going to end terribly. And I don't think this club's given you any reason to think that. But welcome to Atlanta sports, because everybody's always terrified of the other shoe dropping. And that's a shame, because I think sometimes you miss a lot. I don't know. Maybe it's just I really try hard not to be cynical, but I think this club is, one, good as it is, two, has the space and the opportunity to get better, and three, I think they've shown the ambition to always be the best club in this league. So, when I connect the dots that I'm looking at, I'm expecting them to get better, and I'm expecting them to be good enough to compete right now.
Daniel Price brings in his thought process this morning. I had always assumed that Tito would be one of the most likely gone at the end of 2019. Admittedly, it wasn't a good year for him. The injury seemed to derail what Tito had initially going for him. Don't get me wrong, I love Tito. He just makes way too much money to be a designated bench warmer in a cap league. He wants more minutes, and there's no guarantee that FDB will be able to give them to him. A trade or a sell to another team just makes the most sense. I hope he can find that spark again.
Well, that last part's the key, and it's the part that everybody keeps forgetting about all of these moves. Villalba wanted to guarantee a playing time. Gressel wanted a guaranteed contract, and I think it's for a whole lot of money. I don't know if that's going to end up being a whole lot of money, but he didn't want to wait to see with the new CBA, and he wanted a long-term deal. LGP wanted more money. Nagbe wanted to go back to Ohio. All of them were offered deals. All of them were under contract. And all of them wanted to leave. So they all had different reasons for it. But they all wanted to leave. Do you want to keep a player who doesn't want to be here? That usually is not a recipe for success.
No.
That usually does not go well in any sport, any team. So these guys wanted that opportunity to go elsewhere, to make more money, for more playing time, to be closer to home. All those things are completely valid reasons. And that means the club has to work hard to replace them. That's what they're doing. And the thing that I guess rankles me the most about all of it is they have brought in reinforcements. And if you don't like them, that's up to you. But Fernando Meza comes in as a more accomplished player than Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez was when he got here. Meza had a very good season at Necaxa last year. Brooks Lennon, promising young player. More promise coming in at a younger age than Julian Gressel when he got here. You've added depth in Mulroney and Castillo, a veteran depth there. John, veteran depth there, if I could speak. You've added pieces. Can you add more? Yeah, we just went through. You've got allocation money. You've now got a pretty big roster spot in terms of salary to work with. It's not like you've just had players go and nothing has come in. That's the part that it's kind of like, all right, now we're picking and choosing to fit a narrative. And that's a shame because, I've seen a lot of conversation about how many players you've lost and how much they played. Fernando Meza played 2,800 minutes last season in 2019 at Necaxa. He's replacing LGP, minutes for minutes. That's pretty much it. Castillo played 1693 last season, and he had an injury at the end, and he would have played more. Okay. You're basically replacing the triumvirate of Breck Shea, Justin Mara, Mikey Ambrose on the left side with Castillo and George Bello, who would have been in that mix last year if he hadn't been hurt. Two players coming off of injuries, and yeah, that's a concern, but it's not like you haven't replaced those minutes on the left side with players who have experience or have promise in Bello. Lennon played 1,500 minutes last season. He played 3,100 in 2018. It's a guy who's played. It's a guy with experience. So, Anton Walks even. Let's be real about that. In his last full season at Portsmouth, he played just under 1,600 minutes. He played 860 so far in the current 2019-2020 season before he gets here, and I think he's arriving later this week, according to Doug. It's another guy who's played minutes. Walks played more minutes than Pogba did. So that's another replacement. Minutes are being replaced. Just because minutes are gone doesn't mean that minutes aren't being replaced. That's the whole point. You've brought in players. You have room to bring in more. And I think you're going to be playing a little bit differently as a base. And that's where I'm at after this move specifically. This move makes me think that it's going to be far less 4-3-3, far more three in the back, fluid midfield, wing backs, front. It's going to be more of a 3-back than a 4-back. And that's what this move makes me think. Because if not, then you do have more concerns about a true right-wing option. You have Brooks Lennon who can play on the right wing. If you wanted to play 4-3-3 today, if you wanted to play 4-3-3 out of the group you have right now, out of the group you're starting today, let's go from that. You would play Mulroney as a left back out of this group. Let's say 10 minutes in, you decide to shift to a 4-3-3. This is what you do. Out of the group that is supposed to play today against Philadelphia, Right now, 3-4-3, your three center backs, Meza, Robinson, Escobar. Your wing backs, Mulroney on the left, Lennon on the right. Your two central midfielders, Remedi, Heineman. Your three up front, Pitti and Barco, supporting Joseph. That's what it looks like in a 3-4-3. You want to shift that to a 4-3-3? Very easy. Mulroney from left wing back drops to left back. Your three center backs slide over, and Escobar becomes your right back. Lennon moves up to your right wing, and either Pitti or Barco moves back as a 10 in front of Heineman and Remedi. The other one plays on the left wing. Done. That's your 4-3-3. Same lineup. That's how fluid it's going to be. Lennon can play on the right wing too. And if he's playing on the right wing, you're playing in a 4-back setup, and Escobar is playing as a right back, which I think he is completely and utterly comfortable in. That's how fluid this is going to be this year, folks.
Reminder, Mike Conti and Felipe Cardenas joining us in hour number 2. Mike Conti will be joining us at the top of the hour. Lieutenant Dave, sorry, but players out, double greater than sign, players signed. Front office has done right in the past, but trust is waning that they'll even balance. Guess
why is trust waning? Hold on. Oh. Why is trust waning? That's the part that I just don't understand. Also, the players out. And I'm going to assume you're talking about the major ones. I'm going to assume it is Nagbe, LGP, Gressel, Villalba. Okay. Villalba played less than 1,000 minutes last year. Nagbe, you already started to replace him with Heineman last summer, and you brought him back on a permanent deal. LGP, you've replaced with Meza. Gressel, you've replaced with Lennon. I think it's a little bit of a jump to conclusions to say that the new trio is worse than the old trio. You have to wait and see. You got younger. You created more space with your cap. You brought in things to work with, and you're not done yet. So, let's say you go get that central midfielder. Let's say you go make that happen because it's obvious that's something that everybody's working towards. You go bring that in. So then you're replacing the 4, Nagbe, LGP, Gressel, Villalba, with Heineman, Lennon, Meza, new central midfielder. We'll wait and see what happens. But this idea that the trust is waning, why? If they made moves you don't like, that's a different conversation than the trust in them being able to build a strong squad. Those are two very different things. If you don't like the moves out of an emotional sense, hey, I understand that. I completely understand that. But that's a different conversation than trusting in their ability to do their job that they've done better than any front office to launch a team in this league's history. So, I don't know. That's where I'm at. I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish the tweet.
No, Lieutenant Dave basically said, guess Champions League's not a goal. Playoff line maybe. Welcome to rebuild. #overreaction Wednesday.
That's an overreaction in my opinion. And we'll see. Look, Dave, I mean, you haven't even played a game yet that counts. And the transfer window's not closed. Things aren't done. I think that's a lot of an overreaction. But we'll find out, won't we? Because that's how these things go. I'm frustrated that this has gotten so negative because of assumptions. That's the problem I have with it. When you look at teams that have actually dismantled a championship team, it's obvious they were dismantling a championship team. The Florida Marlins, they couldn't pay anybody. They didn't want to pay anybody. They got rid of everybody. They didn't bring in anybody. Fernando Meza, Brooks Lennon, Emerson Heineman, you're not talking about nobodies here, guys. You're talking about good players coming in here. A couple of them are younger than what you had to work before. And you still got room to get better. You're not done. So, I don't know. That's I guess when it comes down to it, the frustration that I have with where things are right now is the reaction that you've just decided to dismantle a team because. That's not what's happening. That's not what's happened. There's nothing to lead you to believe that outside of emotion. And I get feeling sad and hurt and upset that favorite players are gone. That's what sports is. You have passion about it. You love your favorite players. But I just don't remember seeing a reaction like this, that because some favorite players are gone, and that's led people to say that you've lost trust in the front office and they don't know what they're doing, and the point where people are getting called out and there's anger about a service dog program being brought in. I mean, it's getting ridiculous. And I hope it changes. I hope this team wins every trophy possible, because I think that's the goal every single year. I don't think that's changed. 2, I hope that Meza, Lennon, Heineman, if new central midfielder happens now, if it happens in the summer, I hope they are all-stars. I hope they are all outstanding players. And what I also hope is that the people who feel like they've lost trust, I hope that is just an emotional reaction. And I hope that they realize that, hey, these guys have known what they're doing for 3 years. I don't think they forgot how to do something in the off season. But we'll find out, because these decisions all get measured by success. They do. That's sports. And every decision is going to get measured, because that's what people do. That's how this is. It's obvious at the end of the day, was it successful? Did the trophy get lifted? Did you reach your goals? Because for Atlanta United, that's trophies. And we'll find out. And we'll find out what other moves could be made, because they've all said that's what they're trying to do, and they have the allocation money to do it. And the allocation money doesn't make you rich. It's paper money. So anyway, we're going to take a break. We're going to get Mike Conti on the line, and we will check in with Mike on his thoughts right after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, the Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency, or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Soccer Down Here, hour number 2. Welcome to the Panic Room, Mike Conti.
Oh, brother. All right. Well, let's start with this.
Let's start with something good. Favorite Tito Villalba moment?
Oh, boy. The goal against, he had two in 2018 that were just unbelievable. Well, obviously, they were believable goals. They happened, but just incredible goals. And they were both kind of similar, the Columbus goal and the goal against Red Bulls, because they were kind of long, very long, slaloming runs that ended with great finishes. And the goal against Red Bulls really, for all intents and purposes, that is the goal that won the MLS Cup for Atlanta United. With all due respect to the goal that Joseph scored against Portland, with all due respect to everything that had happened leading up to that Tito goal in the first leg against Red Bulls, that gave Atlanta United a 3-0 lead on aggregate going up to New York. They were not going to blow that. If it were 2-0 on aggregate going up to Red Bull Arena, I think we would have been a lot more nervous about that match, right? So that, for all intents and purposes, was the goal, in my opinion, that clinched the MLS Cup for Atlanta United. It was just such a thing of beauty. It was one of those leap out of the booth. You can't believe he's actually doing this. You can't believe he hasn't been dispossessed. You can't believe he was able to finish. And then the emotion he had, as he kind of cupped his ears and did that hand thing, and it was on the supporters' end of the stadium. It was just so much magic, so much kind of created that memorable scene. And look, this is obviously not disrespecting the goals he had against Orlando, especially the big goal late in Orlando in 2017. I just wasn't there for that. I'm talking about goals that I was there for. So the Columbus and Red Bulls goals just really, really stand out to me. But he had so many golazos. And it's a little disappointing, I think, that we didn't really see a whole lot of that in 2019 for one reason or another. He was kind of in and out of first choice. He had the injury that he suffered at Red Bulls, which was extremely ill-timed because Atlanta United was really starting to get things rolling after that 5-match clean sheet streak, and Tito was really starting to step up and get comfortable. But when Tito finally got healthy again, I feel like he wasn't really able to make the most of his opportunities when he got to play. And it's a shame that, the final couple matches, there were moments for Atlanta United that we saw of Tito this past season don't necessarily stack up to the magic that we saw in 2018 when he was scoring all of those bangers.
The Columbus goal is a good shout. I forget about that one a lot because when I think of 2018, I think of his goal against the Red Bulls. I don't think anything tops the goal at Bobby Dodd for me, though. The goal against Orlando at Bobby Dodd is definitely the Tito memory that I'll remember the most. To get a point in that match and just the way that played out, it was the last goal at Bobby Dodd. That's the one that I'll always go back to. But that Columbus one, that's a really underrated goal.
Yeah, and again, kind of similar to the goal against Red Bulls, right? Like a very long slaloming run, if I remember correctly. And it was one of those, like, how's the ball still on his boots? How did he get this deep without being dispossessed? But look, Tito is a very popular player here, and obviously we're going to miss him because there's so many positive memories associated with Tito Villalba. And he did a great job for this club, and because he did a great job for this club, they're able to, if reports are correct, get 7 figures for him and now move on and try to get ready for this 2020 season.
So you want to hit the timeline just like last time, Mike, or how do you want to play this?
No, go ahead. Yeah, fire away. I've seen some really good questions, and I think, look, I think there's some reasonable concern because some people are looking at departures next to additions and saying, well, wait a minute, it looks like we've lost a lot of quality. Have we backfilled in a way where Atlanta United can still be competitive or as competitive as they would be pre-departures? I think if you look at it position by position, and John, go ahead with the timeline, but I think if you look at it position by position, it might not be quite as bleak as what some people think.
And before you leave, I do want to ask you about salary caps and negotiating them from an NBA perspective, since you get to see that for the Hawks, and they're $9 billion under the cap currently, but just as a comparison for folks who...
That's actually not true. That's actually not true, by the way, but we can get into that.
But yeah, just have that as a topic for later.
Sure.
Under the weather wants to say that I know there's a plan, but I'd like to see more movement. Time for Lucy to save us all with some diamonds she dug up from around the world. What kind of winger do you see Atlanta going after? Pacey like Tito or more of a scorer?
I'm going to jump in real fast, Mike, because I think when you connect the dots, it's not about a winger anymore. And that's something that you're going to have to get when you look at this shape. It's going to be more three in the back. It's going to be less true wingers. The width is going to come from the wing backs, which you have quite a few options on both sides. Yeah. It's not going to be wide up at the front. That's going to tuck in. It's going to look a lot like this team did. Remember that run of games where you were in the 3-5-2, but then when Barco came back, and it was 3-5-2, but it was Barco, Pitti, and Joseph as the 10 and the 2 forwards, if you're calling it a 3-5-2. And we talked about it, Mike. It played a lot more like a 3-4-2-1 or a 3-4-3. I think the personnel points you in that direction now.
Totally agree. And if it is more of a 3-4-3 look, you're not concerned because you still have Pitti, Barco, and Joseph up top. I'm not concerned about that. If you're wondering depth at wingback, I think Jason is spot on. Bello, Lennon, Escobar could be in that mix. You're fine. You're fine. Maybe you would want one more left wing back with a little bit more pace, but maybe Mulroney can be that guy. I just don't know enough about him.
I think he's expected to have that opportunity.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I know some people are latching on to Doug's report yesterday that Frank has indicated they want another midfielder and they want another winger. That, by the way, might be the same person. Someone who can fill both roles, or dependent on formations, can be a midfielder who essentially is a winger. I would not overly parse what Frank said about that yesterday. But I mean, look, depth is a good thing, right? And if you look at Atlanta United, they've got a bunch of slots right now and a bunch of TAM apparently to spend. So, if you want to bring in another winger for depth, I want to see Atlanta United play fast. I want to see them play fast. And I think the way that they've kind of constructed themselves, at least to this point for the 2020 season, is this is a team that's going to play pretty fast. So I would, if it's for solely a depth reason to fill a slot, I would lean more towards pace. But I think Jason's comments are 100% right. That right now, in a 3-4-3, you're not really, I think, as concerned about finding a winger urgently going into CONCACAF.
Yeah, I think the winger's secondary. I think the central midfielder to give you another option there is the more primary need. You've got options. I mean, if today the lineup that was shared with Frank or by Frank to Doug about today's friendly with Philadelphia. Replace Mulroney unless he earns that job. I would expect that Bello or Castillo would have more of a shot of that, but replace him. Otherwise, that's a lineup that you could see against Motagua in day one of CONCACAF, and exactly. I don't feel bad about it.
No. And again, even from the standpoint of depth, which I know some people are very concerned about, I don't think you're in that bad of shape.
No.
I really, really don't.
No, you can add more. You've got the roster spots. You've been pretty clear about wanting to add, but right now you've got a squad of, I think it's 21 if the Villalba deal gets done. When that gets done, that puts you at 21 on your roster. I think you'd like to get into more of that 23, 24 range, and probably one more high profile. The others might be pure depth.
Yeah,
and that's fine. Listen to top managers now, because this is always the balance that a Pep Guardiola, a Jurgen Klopp, managers like that at clubs who can go out and spend whatever they want. They could have a squad of 50 if they wanted to. They don't want that. They want a group that is a little bit smaller, where roles are defined, or if they have extra guys, they know they're up and coming or they're reserve players or whatever. They don't it's hard to get to the level of tactical expertise. The things that Frank has talked about for a year and a couple months now about players realizing and recognizing situations on the field. It's hard to do that when you're working with 30 guys. It's a lot easier to get the reps and do that when you're working with really 22, 23, 24. It's something that managers look for these days. So I'm not expecting a full 30 of guys that you could see playing 30 times in the regular season. I just don't think that's going to happen.
Allison Cupertino, Jason, this morning, probably an unpopular opinion, but I'm not worried about this. Tito was a fan favorite, but was never, in my opinion, an irreplaceable player on the roster. We have time to sign the pieces we need, and I'm sure we'll get something done. Too early to write the team off just yet.
Yeah, see, this is the one, Mike, that for me is more sentimental because Tito was your first player that started to create the identity of what Atlanta United turned into. You
totally
had Chris
agree.
McCann, you had Kenwin Jones, you had a couple other signings that didn't really turn into anything before that, but Tito was the one that helped give this team that early identity. And Tito in 2017 was such a massive part of that first year that a lot of people fell in love with the team. So from that emotional perspective, this is the one that I'm kind of like, oh, man, this was a player that I wished could retire here. It's just not realistic in the world of the game.
In 2017, he played in and started in every league match. Played over 2,700 minutes, 13 goals, 11 assists. Played out of his mind, had a great season. So I totally agree with you that, the Atlanta United that we all fell in love with in 2017, Tito Villalba was one of the big faces of that team. Right there with Joseph and Miguel Almiron. Like that was your three. They were the big three on that 2017 team, the team that we all fell in love with. Let's look at the more pragmatic side of this, though. And I'm not trying to throw cold water on what you're saying, Jason, because I agree with you 100%. Tito Villalba played in 20 league matches last year, started 10. So he went from 2,700 minutes in 2017 to 900 minutes last year. He went from 13 goals in 2017 to 1 last year. He went from 11 assists in 2017 to 4 last year. Okay? So obviously, he fell out of first choice for Frank de Boer. He demanded, reportedly, more playing time. Atlanta United was not prepared to give him more playing time. So what do? You do right by the player, and you send him reportedly down to Paraguay where he's going to get more playing time. Again, Atlanta United trying to do right by a player who isn't willing to wait anymore, similar to Julian Gressel. But I think just like the Gressel thing, Gressel was sentimental too. I think it's a very important part of the story to remember. Julian Gressel demanded a trade. Tito Villalba demanded more playing time, reportedly. Okay, so it's not like these guys were just shipped off for no reason. Atlanta United was not in a position to financially meet the expectation of Julian Gressel, and they were not in a position where they could meet the playing time demands of Tito Villalba. So they did what they have to do as a club. I think that's very, very important to keep in mind. And I'm not trying to make it sound like, well, Tito wanted out and Julian Gressel wanted out. I think that's a little too ambiguous. But at the same time, there is some truth to that. Tito Villalba was reportedly dissatisfied with the amount of playing time he was getting and wanted out. So the club said, okay. I think that's very important to remember.
Critical, because that's the reality of the situation. And you can take it further with Nagbe and Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez. Both wanted certain things that you couldn't get to. So you did right by the player in every one of these situations. They got what they wanted, and they got what they needed for their career.
And the other part of it, Jason, is unlike DC United, Atlanta United acquired assets, whether it be TAM or some other form of money. they got something when they lost these players. Unlike DC United, who lost a lot of their high-profile players for nothing. They got nothing in return. So that's a big part of it, too. But I'm totally with you. I mean, Tito Villalba, for me, is always going to be associated with that magical 2017 team. And you mentioned the Orlando goal, which was scored in Bobby Dodd Stadium. But, there's still a large section of this fan base that's very sentimental for Bobby Dodd Stadium for the same reasons, I think, as we're talking about Tito Villalba, because it was very special. And it was unique, and it was kind of organic. It was something that was kind of a stopgap measure to allow for Mercedes-Benz Stadium to be completed. But now, objectively, can you tell me that Mercedes-Benz Stadium, from a comfort and fan-friendly standpoint, is not 10,000 miles better than the Bobby Dodd Stadium experience? So it's okay to be sentimental, but I think we also need to look at things a little bit realistically, that it is not 2017 anymore. It's 2020. And you've got to put your club in the best position to win now, and not kind of live in the past. I'll give you an example in ice hockey. The Philadelphia Flyers, for 40 years after the Broad Street Bullies won the Stanley Cup, kept constructing their team in such a way that could win in 1975, but not necessarily in 2015.
Nope.
They're really paying the price for that now. And that's that. I'm not comparing that to Atlanta United, but I'm just trying to give you an example that, rather than live in the past and go too far in trying to honor your past, you've got to put yourself in a position where you're contending for trophies every year. And this, unfortunately, is a move that is going to help Atlanta United contend for more trophies this year.
Give you another one, Mike, in the NHL, the Los Angeles Kings.
Mm-hmm.
And we see how they're saddled with older players at high cap numbers and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and look, I mean, quite honestly, look at where the Atlanta Falcons are right now, where they're in some really difficult shape with salary cap, and Rich McKay and everyone up there has said that they'll find a way to figure it out. They always do, and I don't doubt that. But you're probably looking at some of the contracts that the Falcons have given out over the last couple of years. Maybe they overpaid for some players, and that's put them in a bad position now. I would rather be in the spot where Atlanta United is right now, where they have money to spend. They have a bunch of slots. They can go out and basically do pretty much anything they want, short of signing another designated player right now. I'd much rather have that flexibility while still being competitive than be in a position like the old Seattle Seahawks from a couple years ago, where they were stuck with all those defensive players that they drafted, and they couldn't pay all of them because they overpaid some.
All right. Trying to figure out where I was on the timeline before we were going off on side tangents and talking about the National Hockey League, although I have no issue talking about the National Hockey League.
I was up in Toronto last night. That was so much fun, by the way, just being able to sit around and talk to people about hockey for a couple hours. And, they have all these black and white portraits in the Scotiabank Arena. Their Stanley Cup championships. They haven't won a Stanley Cup since 1967 there, so I don't think a color photo of any of that exists yet. But it was fun just being able to sit around there last night and talk hockey with people for a little while, and then call the Hawks game.
Shiva's not worried nor surprised about Tito. We'll miss him and his passion and energy on the field, but Frank DeBoer said yesterday, we're thin in the midfield, and it does concern me that the front office has not addressed this area sooner, knowing how important it is to FDB.
Well, I think they will. Again, as I said with you guys last week, and as I said on Stoppage Time, I don't think they're done. I really, really don't. But even if maybe on the outside chance they were done, your midfield situation is not quite as bleak as some are making it out to be, because you have, we'll just go through the names: Emerson Hyndman, Eric Rometty, Mo Adams, Jeff Lorenowitz, Anton Walks could play in the midfield. Luis Fernando could play up as a number 10, if you want to count that as midfield. I know some people do, some people don't. Meza could play as a holding midfielder. So I think you're a little bit better in the midfield than some people are making it out to be. I do think they have another move. They have another bullet in the chamber. I really do. Just because they have so many spots and so much TAM to spend, and in theory, they're probably going to have to spend some of it. They don't have a choice. I don't think they're done yet, to Shiva's point. I know it's hard to be patient because CONCACAF literally starts in 13 days, and you're about to go into some actually pretty heavy preseason match congestion. You got a fixture today, a fixture Saturday. They're going to go to Mexico and continue training down there. You have the fixture in Birmingham before that. So you'd like to see this get sorted out pretty soon, but I think you still have time because you do have a couple preseason fixtures where if you can bring in a guy by the end of this week, early next week, there is still enough time to hopefully develop a little bit of chemistry.
There's plenty of time. I mean, let's be real about it. Leandro Gonzalez Perez didn't train with Xolos and showed up and played, and that was the best game he's played with Xolos. So, It can be done. Is it ideal? No, not at all. But this team, I could probably, and I have not done the math on it, I think I could probably put together 5, 6, maybe 7 different good lineups in a 4-3-3 and a 3-5-2 and a 3-4-3 that people wouldn't feel too bad about. I think you've got a lot of options today, and I agree. I think they're going to go out and get somebody with the space that they have, with the allocation money that they have. And honestly, I could see a scenario, because we don't know what the CBA is going to do. We don't know how much room that's going to give you. I could see a scenario where you get somebody now and you get somebody later. Because once you know what the CBA is, you might have more room than you think. You might be able to leverage things more. With where your team is now, let's say you go get that central midfielder, because that's been the ongoing conversation. Let's say you go get that. So you upgrade there. You make that part better. You go into the summer window with a good team, with money to spend, and the ability to solve any problem that has come up. Say you had an injury. Say you had somebody, form wasn't there. Say a player falls into your lap from anywhere in the world, because you're going to have international slots too. You can do whatever you want in the summer window. You can be good now, and you can make whatever move you need to do in the summer to put it over the top. It's a good spot to be.
Taka, as a part of the discussion this morning, here's my thing. I love the players that have been sold, but in a vacuum, I'm not upset that they were sold for profit. What I'm upset about is that the front office decided to do all 4 at the same window, while also losing our captain, not returning numerous trusted depth players, and in doing so, 3 weeks before we begin the biggest cup competition of the year that was a stated priority, and without major signings to replace these players, and capital letters. Okay. Our only numbers are our only rumors are a depth center mid and a quality left back, which we have.
Whoa. Okay, there's a few things at the end that I got to take issue with. Villasanti and Arzamendia are the 2 players there. I don't think either would be depth pieces. I don't think they'd be brought in to be making up numbers. I don't think that's what you're looking for here. But the biggest thing here that you just have to understand is you can't control timelines. You couldn't control last year. You lined up Pity Martinez ahead of time. You had it done. People were talking about it in October of 2018. The president of River Plate was talking about it in December. It was done. You had your celebration of the Copa Libertadores win at El Monumental, and you knew it was a going-away party for Pity Martinez. But it wasn't announced here until later, and then you hadn't sold Miguel Almiron yet. And that ended up being more complicated than you thought it would be. You were going to find a way to get it done, but that one was the opposite way. You can't guarantee the timeline of when players ask to go and when you can get the deals done to bring players in. And DeBoer mentioned it today in the AJC with Doug. Sometimes you have plans that do fall through. Sometimes you have players that ask for more at the last minute. You have agents that ask for more at the last minute, and things get complicated.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I think it's a very important part of the story, if we're going to be fair, to remind everyone that Julian Gressel demanded a trade. Atlanta United could have made him a bona fide offer at the end of this year and retained his rights, and he could have held out all of next year. But Julian Gressel was the one who didn't want to wait any longer and demanded a trade. And by the way, I'm not going to get into his pocket. That's totally fine. That's totally within his right. I don't blame him for doing it, but that's kind of out of the club's control. Frankly, it's out of the club's control that the new CBA has not been agreed to yet. A CBA that expires in 2 days. That's out of the club's control. There's negotiations right now, but Atlanta United is not the singular entity that's negotiating it. You can't control that Tito Villalba is going to be dissatisfied with the amount of playing time that he's getting. So I don't think this was like an intentional effort by, and by the way, let's be really careful when we say front office, because that loops in a lot of people who have absolutely nothing to do with any of this. But as far as the player personnel side of Atlanta United is concerned, it's not like they made this intentional decision to get rid of all these popular players, and heck, if that means we're thin going into CONCACAF, so be it.
Yeah, it wasn't a spiteful move just to sit there and go, meh.
Yeah. And honestly, I think most people don't believe that, but I've interacted with some people socially over the last couple days who are telling me that the front office is done wrong by the fans, and that the fans deserve more respect than this. And I know that people are emotional, but I think, again, you have to go back to a discussion we were having last year when there was some discomfort early in the season with the way things were looking on the pitch. And I'll go back to something that Frank DeBoer said. He was trying to put his team in the best position to win matches, not necessarily entertain the fans. And that's what it all comes down to. It's winning matches and winning trophies. And yeah, it hurts to see some popular players leave, but Atlanta United is doing what they believe is in their best interest to go out and win a couple more trophies this year. And ultimately, that's what it's all going to come down to, as it did this past year.
Mike, we're going to have a lot to talk about this afternoon, aren't we?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, very definitely. 2 p.m. stoppage time on the 92.9 The Game Facebook page. I'm looking forward to Felipe on your show because he's done some great reporting on all this.
Yep, we're going to dial Felipe up now. I think we're going to have to do a new depth chart this afternoon in the 3-4-3, 3-4-2-1, 3-5-2, whatever you want to call it shape.
No, but, honestly, not that much different.
No,
not that much different
really
from last
not.
week. But I think that's an important exercise, and for those of you listening who are still a little bit uncertain, a little bit concerned about everything that's happened, I think when you look at Jason's depth chart, we're going to have to work on your penmanship this week. But when you look at
slanted, I was leaning over. It was weird.
When you look at Jason's depth chart, I think you're going to feel a little bit better than you might right now.
I have nice handwriting.
That's fine.
All right, I'll see you later.
See you guys.
Bye.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Let's get Felipe Cardenas on the line right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yep, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. SDH on an impromptu Overreaction Wednesday. This is becoming a thing. I hope next Wednesday is not an Overreaction Wednesday. I don't want an Overreaction Wednesday on my birthday. That's all I'm asking for. No Overreaction Wednesday on my birthday, please.
Disallowed.
Felipe, can you make this happen for us?
I can't guarantee that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. We all jumped into this business knowing that things can happen at 11 o'clock at night.
It's true. You're part of the reason it's an Overreaction Wednesday.
Let's
talk a little bit about it. So, honestly, I think a lot of people, if you really got out of the timing here, expected this to kind of happen at some point, maybe not this late. How do you, from what you've heard, how did this kind of come together with Tito Villalba heading to Paraguay and Libertad?
So, I think I know you guys love to do kind of timelines on the show, and I think this is an important one because there has been, you've kind of seen this coming together really even since the end of the 2018 season. And so, he just crushes it in 2017. I heard you guys before I came on, and I agree with you, Jason. Like, I really think Tito was Atlanta United for a big chunk of that first season. He was like the guy, he was the man. He was that difference maker, not only in Atlanta, but in MLS. Like, in MLS, it's like, who is this guy? This guy is just like a monster, with his passion, the goals that he would score, everything from the way he celebrated was just different. And it really, to your point, it began that real like evolution of the team, and it created that identity of like where when the South American players, to be really frank, and I think this is one of the things that like I would like to touch on is like it can be a cliche to call people or players the heart and soul of teams. I know we hear that across all sports, but I think Tito, LGP, Miguel, Joseph, they were that. And obviously Parky, Lorenowitz, Guzan, like, the other players were big parts of that team. But I think, the heart and soul of Atlanta United for the first 3 years was that core South American contingent, really led by Tito. So, he gets that injury to end the 2018 season. Tata changes his role, and he still kind of comes on and becomes that super sub that any team in MLS would want, gets healthy again. And, right away in 2019 under Frank de Boer, he just wasn't rated really by the manager. He was not a starter. PT's arrival also didn't help him as far as the depth chart goes. I wrote about this back, during the Champions League last season when Monterrey came to town and he didn't play. I think he played, maybe the last few minutes in the victory here at Mercedes-Benz, and he came into the mix zone and he wasn't happy. He was obviously not happy with being in that position. And he spoke to the Spanish media, and I think he started out really upset about it, saying things like, when he was asked why didn't you play, or he was like, talk to the manager, very kind of like cut and dry. And then throughout that mix zone appearance, he started to kind of like calm down a little bit. But I think it showed, a player that felt that he was important to the club, important to what the club had accomplished, and then he saw his opportunities diminishing. And so I think tactically it was pretty open, it was pretty public. Even his own teammates would talk about it. LGP last year talking about saying, okay, maybe Tito isn't the type of player that Frank de Boer really wants or really favors in the way that he wants to play, but they really believed in him. They knew what he could offer. They thought that he could play in different positions and kind of help the team that was, they were struggling at first to continue to like just if we get really tactical, they were struggling to build out of the back under Frank de Boer a little bit, and what their new roles were. And I remember Leandro was the kind of guy that was like, Tito's that kind of guy that gives us that outlet. But it just didn't work out. He had the injury. I heard Mike say it. Mike Conti was he's right. He was coming into his own and finding a role under Frank, and then he gets injured. So that's like the tactical part. I think from a club perspective, which is important, and it's what we, Paul Tenorio, Jeff Ruder, and I reported last night when we broke the news that he was being sold to Club Libertad in Paraguay, is that this is a financial decision as well. I don't think Atlanta United is crazy about letting a player like Tito Villalba go. They know the quality that he has, but he's on a big salary. If they're succession planning, which is something that Carlos Buckenberger told me personally during an interview last summer, it's part of the plan, then these are decisions that have to be made, and they're not easy decisions. But if they're looking at cap space, they're looking at ways to strengthen the squad, certain areas, maybe being a little, I don't want to say frugal, but a little bit more careful about how to manage money, in this new climate of MLS, there will be like financial casualties. And I think Tito was one of those guys.
Jason, did you want to get into talking about Libertad before I ask my first question?
Yeah, just I think so people understand a little bit on the other side. We know Cerro Porteño because of the Miguel Almiron connection. Libertad is not a giant in Paraguay, but this is a big year for them, and with the financial implications of this would, I think, from what I can tell, maybe be their largest incoming transfer in club history, but it could lead to more money if they have a good Libertadores campaign and a good league season.
Correct. I think Libertad is a well-known club in Paraguay and in South America, and I mean they've played in international tournaments. Anyone that follows South American soccer, not necessarily recently, but just historically knows that it's Olimpia, Cerro Porteño, and then you have Libertad. These are big clubs in Paraguay. Like Olimpia is a massive club. I think they've won the league 44 times, might be between 43, 44 times. The 43rd, I think, being the last season. But Libertad finished in second, so they are coming up and they're spending money. They're up until last week, I believe, when I was doing some research. Their club president was talking about bringing in new players, about spending a little bit more, that they weren't done yet, that they were looking at the Copa Libertadores as an opportunity to strengthen the squad. But I think it starts with the manager, and it's really important to understand who they went after. Ramon Diaz is like the Tata Martino type of manager at River Plate. Won a lot with them. Actually had Marcelo Gallardo as one of his central midfielders, very popular among the River Plate, what they call the world of River Plate, and very popular in South America, and especially in Argentina. So they hire him, which is a big hire, and it's the first time that he'll be managing in that country, in Paraguay. But it's one of those hires that's like, we're taking this very seriously. We're bringing in a top manager that is familiar with these types of international tournaments, that is familiar with battling in a perhaps a difficult league that is dominated by one or two players. And so Ramon Diaz has also brought in his son Emiliano as an assistant, and they are the guys, according to one of our sources, is that they reached out to Tito probably when this deal was starting to come together, very similar to what LGP talked about. Once the deal looks like, hey, this is going to happen, this is good for you, this is good for both you, club, etc. The players, the agents, they start to talk. People start to reach out for references, and that's what happened here. Understanding that the president reached out personally to Tito, and I think for a player, all of a sudden you feel important. You feel like you're going to be part of this squad, a key member of the team, and so now they're in Group H for Copa Libertadores, the same group as Boca Juniors, which obviously will be the favorite. They're in with the same group with Caracas FC out of Venezuela. So to your point, it is a manageable group. The fourth team is yet to be determined. There's still some playoff games being played to determine the fourth seed in a lot of the groups. So it is a manageable group. And I think Tito is a former Copa Lib champion. Let's not forget. I think it's just so rare today to have players like that in MLS that have won the Champions League of South America. Like the tournament that kids in South America grow up wanting to play, even before they say, I want to go to Europe. Kids in South America, players want to win Copa Libertadores. And so that's something that Tito has done. That's probably big for Libertad to bring a player in that has been in that position.
My first question for you, Felipe, has to do with what we were talking about when you first came on, is that we're in this business because we enjoy the storytelling aspect of it, and sometimes the story comes out at 11 o'clock at night, and you got to do what you got to do. When it comes to the art of chasing a story, and specifically this one, I guess, what was the timetable and having to turn something like this? How many phone calls and texts and tweets and DMs went into turning information like this for the story for The Athletic?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'll say that, Paul Tenorio and Sam Stachel were the first to report in December during actually it was January 3rd in one of their, what they call an MLS notebook, that there was this opportunity that Atlanta United would be open to moving. No, I'm sorry, it was in December, that they would be open to moving both Leandro Gonzalez Perez and Tito Villalba. In that same notebook from December they also were the first to report that perhaps Julian Gressel's situation could change, that maybe the team was open to a trade. So that's where this started. This comes from two very experienced colleagues of mine in Paul Tenorio and Sam Stachel, who I'm very privileged to work alongside because we share knowledge, we share information, we have the ability to chase certain stories together if that's the way it's working out, and so that's where that started. So it was already on, I think, our radar for sure. I think it was definitely something that Paul was probably aware of, and so then when Doug Robertson from the AJC reported that the club was close to a sale for Tito, and that it was an unnamed Paraguayan club, and that's really when, for me, you start making calls and you hear and you confirm. I think the most important thing for us, especially at The Athletic, and I'm sure just at other outlets, is it's really important to confirm the information, and we take that very seriously. We work with our editors. We're constantly slacking, calling, interrupting people's dinners, if that's what it takes. I was at dinner with my family and my sister-in-law when all this was going on, and I had to say, I'm sorry, this is happening. You don't want to be that guy that's on the phone at La Fonda. I was at La Fonda. And so, yeah, but it just, you have to be sure. I think confirmation is key. And that's where we operate in making sure that the information is accurate, supported, and then we decide, okay, let's start writing. And so, I think it was a team effort, obviously, with a lot of the things that we've done with The Athletic is that opportunity to work with guys that are really well connected, really well informed, and then going through our process of due diligence to make sure that the reporting is accurate. That's an excellent dinner choice, by the way. I love it. Yeah, it's can't go wrong with La Fonda. No, it's always solid. This has been an interesting offseason. I mean, it's not done, so I think that's the hardest thing about evaluating it at this point is there's still plenty of time to make moves. There's moves being rumored. There's a lot of time in this window, and MLS is a little awkward because of that May 5th window closing date. Taking stock of it now kind of around the league, who's jumped out to you as improving their stock and who maybe has a lot of work to do? Yeah, that's kind of like one of the especially this offseason, I feel like that is a big question. It is a debate. It is one of the key debates, who made the moves that strengthened their squad and who hasn't really worked. I think, the obvious one for me, I know, Jason, and you and I always talk about this, about Chicago. I think Chicago has this opportunity to be a big club in not only in MLS, but in North America. They have everything in order to do that, to be the big club, to be one of those massive North American, giants that compete internationally, compete domestically, that can attract the best players in from both Europe and South America and Central America. They have a diverse population in Chicago that loves the sport, and it's just taking too long. So I think Chicago is the club that, despite the rebrand, and again, we're not in the marketing meetings, we're not in the front office meetings, so we don't know what the exact plan is, but on the outside, it doesn't look like they've been that thorough, and that other teams are moving very quickly. And so, I like what the Galaxy has done. Obviously, Chicharito, that's obvious, but I like the Katai move. I always thought he's a good player. They still have some work to do in the back. When I spoke with GBS, he was pretty adamant about that. I think he tried to defend a little bit of the way that they play and the game situation that they found themselves in, that they had to chase a lot of games and, just fight for a playoff spot, and you're kind of selling out and you're leaving your back four exposed. But I don't think, at the same time, he understood that they were conceding too many goals. So I think they'll continue to look at how to strengthen that squad. I think it was Taylor Twellman the other day on Extra Time. It may have been him, but I don't think you can disregard Columbus. Just them having Darlington Nagbe already makes them that much better. And I think they were trending in the right direction under Porter, under Caleb Porter. I think he is a proven coach in this league. If you go back and watch the game that they won here in Atlanta, he really outcoached Frank de Boer, and that is not a slight to Frank de Boer, because that happens. But I just felt like they were very well prepared tactically to attack Atlanta United, and they did it really well. And in that game, I think Frank learned a lot too. They adjusted from there. I think they moved some pieces around. And Jason, you mentioned it before I came on. Then I think there is a sample size for Atlanta United at the end of the season of how they may play in this season. So that was a big match. It was one that I think you could see, okay, Columbus, if they make the right moves, this is a team that will be good in the East. So yeah, I think we could go on an entire show and talk about some moves, but I don't think it's been necessarily underwhelming across the board. I thought last season was big for a lot of teams. The fact that just the fact that PT Martinez came to MLS last year was a gigantic news story. So it's tough to just do that every year and bring in that type of caliber of player.
What'd you think about Miami after your visit to the Herons last week?
Yeah, it was good. I think I'll be writing a little bit more on that visit in the next few days, the next few weeks.
John's very skeptical of Miami, by the way.
And that's fine. I think a lot of people are. I think what I got out of there which is something that Paul McDonough told me before when I did like a short list of managers. It's something that I have heard him say on other in other interviews, and it was something that Jorge Mas, the managing owner of the club, said during the press conference to introduce Diego Alonso, is that they're being very deliberate. They're being very careful about how they do things. I think they're not just going out and getting any player that they can. They're going after the top players. They went after the top coaches. And I think, when you do that, you're going to miss a couple times, because you're battling European clubs. You're battling Atletico Madrid and Chelsea for a striker. And so I think from the optics are that they haven't done enough. And I can agree with that. But I think from talking to some of the front office members is that they are aware of that, but that they have other priorities as well. And they want to strengthen the squad and make signings, but they also want the players that they have right now, the players that they've signed, the players that are training, the staff that they have, to understand that this isn't a one-year deal. They need to create a culture. They need to create an identity within the club. They need to create an identity and a mentality on the field. And those things are, in my opinion, I understood it. I understand how that can be very important before you start talking about big signings, because it happened in Atlanta too. Atlanta had the players. They didn't have the world beaters. I think this has been well talked about, that Joseph, Miguel, Tito, LGP, when they arrived, there were a lot of, who are these guys? But they arrived with a very clear idea of how this team was going to play, how they were going to contribute, with inside the locker room, outside the locker room, and not to kind of go off on a tangent, but I think the Miami situation and what's happening in Atlanta, there are parallels. I think Atlanta, the fans want new signings, they want replacements, quote unquote replacements. That is understandable, but in my opinion, I think 2020, and I've written about this, it will be about the players that they need to replace per se, because a lot of big players left. But it's also about how does Atlanta United once again create that chemistry, that mentality that they lost at times last year. Something that Joseph Martinez was public about telling when he told me we've lost our winning mentality. How do they regain that, keep it throughout the season? And then when they bring new players, there's a new manager still. I think Frank is in year 2. You bring in a player from Paraguay or Brazil, and it's not that they just come in and they know exactly what Frank wants. It's a little bit different than if they had a Tata here, where they might have some idea of how he plays. Now they're going to have to come in and jump in, and there's going to be pressure on these new signings to play well right away, and to play well when Atlanta goes down a goal. How does the team come together when they don't have a Parkhurst or an LGP or a Tito? So I think those are some of the other things that I've noticed will be happening in 2020, and something that I think a club like Inter Miami is probably looking at Atlanta, knowing that they have Paul McDonough. They know what goes into building a successful club in year 1.
But I also maintain that and we had this discussion yesterday, that if they do bring in Funes Mori, he's a top 5 scorer in the league.
Well, of course. Funes Mori is a complete baller right now. He's very good. He's hot. He's like a hot striker too. Like, those are the guys that clubs and coaches want. You want a hot striker. You want a guy that will score, multiple bikes and bicycle kicks in one season. A guy that knows how to play under pressure. And I think Funes Mori, there are a lot of players that have played for Diego Alonso and before he arrived in Miami that will continue to be linked. I wrote about, I think, Rodolfo Pizarro. If he's not being targeted by Chicago right now, then Miami should too. When he was playing so well for Mexico in the Gold Cup, I was talking to some of the Mexican journalists, and he was funny because there were rumors that he was going to go to France, Pizarro. And it's funny because, like, in the mix zone, someone asked him, and he's like, yeah. He's like very open. He's like, yeah, that might happen. He didn't hold back. He understood that there was interest, but that hasn't happened. He's still playing in Mexico. He's still with Monterrey, and I think he would be at 25, like one of those big time signings in MLS. A kind of a dual like creator in midfield that can play as a 10, that can play as an inverted winger, that can play in a front 3. And I think he's a guy that Inter Miami would love. I think he's a guy that Chicago would love. So, and Funes Mori as well. He played for Diego Alonso. So it's like those types of players are going to be linked to Miami. It'll be interesting to see, what finally falls into place, what big player arrives, because I think we know if you look at an expansion club, that number 10 shirt is very important. And I want to know who's going to wear that in Miami. I don't think it can be just any player. I don't think it's a player that they've currently signed already.
That's a really good point. That shirt is critical, and they don't have it. And you add in the Miami element of it, and you need a star. Miami needs star power. It's just that kind of city. So it's tricky, and it's a different challenge than what Atlanta had from day one. It's a different challenge than Nashville has this year in a big way. This feels like the year that MLS kind of grows up. It's 25 years old in 2020. Maybe it feels like it's finally, becoming an adult and entering the real world.
You're out of your parents' basement. You're getting your first apartment. Maybe you're you got the big job, and maybe you're getting the mortgage on the new house, that kind of stuff.
I think it's at the end of it. Like, I really think this is the year that MLS is just one of the boys. You're talking about big players from Mexico coming here, not at 35, at 25. You're talking about top scorers from Mexico coming here. You're talking about players from top clubs coming here from South America, but you're also talking about players going to clubs in South America. It's not one-sided anymore. Just feels like MLS is one of the adults at the table now.
I agree, but I agree that they have to make the push. They have to do
Totally
the
agree.
league and the teams and the players. Everyone has to do that, and that the 25-year anniversary is a good time to do it. I think for listeners, maybe an analogy or a metaphor that they can understand is like, you're comfortable at your job. You have a great job. It's borderline a cushy job, but there's another opportunity that if you take it, it's a risk. But if you take it and you get it, you find yourself among maybe leadership that you weren't in before. Maybe it's a promotion. You go from a manager to a director, or from a director to a VP, or vice versa. And I think MLS, if they want to start to play with who they're competing against year in and year out, like Liga MX clubs, like this is the year where they need to be like, okay, we're not the league that drops the ball in CONCACAF anymore. We're not the league that can't get through the first round, or that can't win a final against a Mexican club. And the fact that there's more traffic among Liga MX and MLS clubs, that is a trend that we're starting to see, and not MLS clubs asking permission. Can we take your player on for a loan? No, we're buying your player from Chivas or from Cruz Azul or etc. And so now in Mexico, they're like, okay, these guys, they want to compete. And I think when it was interesting when the All-Star game was announced in LA, and like the Liga MX president was kind of talking trash, it was great. It was kind of like, okay, you guys want to sit at this table with us? Let's do it. But we're here to win. And so MLS has to have that same attitude of one is like, if I want that trophy, if I want that dream job, I have to take risks. I have to get out of my comfort zone, spend more money, or, go all in on a certain tournament, maybe even risk players in order to beat, Santos Laguna or a Club America and earn some respect. So I agree with you. I think it's a good time to do that because the clubs are a little bit more prepared. The players understand what it takes. And you have teams like like an Atlanta United that understands what it takes. Darlington Nagbe was on Sirius XM, I think last week, and I thought something that was interesting that he said about playing for Atlanta was having to accept and embrace that a tie was like a loss, and that pressure that the players felt, especially playing at home and like drawing at home was like unacceptable. So that more clubs need to have that attitude and have to have that expectations in MLS in order for the league as a whole to propel itself and compete internationally.
That's a great point. We could keep going, but you probably have more stories to write because it seems like everything wants to happen while you're on the air with us, right? All these rumors popping off.
I know. There's a lot of rumors, and I think, listen, I had a conversation today with a colleague about, some, the Ares Mendia and or Arsa I'm sorry, and is he coming? Is he not? It looks like, based on information that's out there, that that could be close, and I think that would be really interesting, because the central midfield position, I've written about Vijay Santi and how he can change that midfield. If it's not him, then it's a player like him. But Arsa Mendia, I think is the more established international, even at they're the same age, but he's actually, he started and played several matches in Copa America last summer.
Right.
And the fact that he's a left-footed defender, it immediately, you ask questions about what Atlanta United and what Frank de Boer and obviously Carlos Bocanegra and the scouting team thinks he can add to a position group that I don't want to say it's deep, but they have some players there that can play. They've made some signings. They have guys that can play in that position if they have to, even though they're not natural left-footed players. But I think for me, even though Vijay Santi and a player like him is like, we need a player like that. We need that. In my opinion, Arsa Mendia or players like that, like a left-footed international left back, those players are hard to turn down if you can get them. So that might be what's happening. It's like, hey, he's interested. It could happen, even though we have a George Bello, even though we've signed Edgar Castillo. even though Anton Walks can play there if we have to, even though Brooks Lennon has played at left back for Real Salt Lake, if a guy like Arcemendia at that level, young, a lot of promise, international experience, is interested and the deal can get done, I think you have to do it. So it'll be interesting to see if it happens, how they, position him and what his role would be. But yeah, to your point, I have lots to write. I'm looking forward to it. I'm fired up. I spoke to somebody yesterday that I think Atlanta fans would love to hear about.
Got your mate ready to go. Got your coffee.
Got my coffee.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what's
coffee.
Your energy drink of choice when you need it for these kinds of days?
It's coffee. Listen, I cannot function without my morning coffee, and I tend to go dark with a splash of milk. And then in the afternoon, if it's like, okay, I need something, I'll drink black. So the black coffee in Colombia, which is what I learned to drink in the afternoon, it's like they call it a tinto. Tinto is like kind of like the color. It's like a dark color, but it's just like a black coffee. It can be a shot. It can be an espresso type thing. It's not a big cup of black coffee.
Right.
But that's my go-to. I think right now, if you can't tell, I've had plenty of caffeine already, and I'm ready to start
you're real laid
transcribing. Back. Yeah, I'm ready to start transcribing, start writing, because I do have stories, and one in particular that I just know not only Atlanta United fans, but I think MLS in general would love to hear from this individual I spoke with.
Very cool. Looking forward to it. Have that tinto ready if you need it later.
All right. Yeah. I haven't tried mate. Maybe I'll have to do that, but I'm concerned I'll love it too much. So,
it's
you see the guys with mate,
good.
they never let it go. They don't drop it. So,
yeah. All right, Felipe. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, as always. Friend. We'll talk soon.
All right, guys. Take it easy.
That's a show, y'all. We're after 11. We've got stoppage time over at 929 The Game, facebook.com/929 The Game at 2 o'clock. I'll be on with Andy and Randy at 1:20. AMA will be at the 1:40 segment, so I'm sure there will be a lot of Atlanta United questions. That segment can go off the rails sometimes, and it usually does. So there will probably be some ridiculousness as well, because that's what happens. It's Andy and Randy. It's the midday show. It's fun. Mm-hmm. So all that is today. There are rumors flying. Don't know if there's anything else to come today, but stay tuned. Make sure you're following all your favorite folks. Doug Robertson is at the friendly that I believe just kicked off with Atlanta and Philadelphia behind closed doors. So make sure you're following Doug Robertson, AJC, for updates. We're going to try to get Doug on tomorrow's show or Friday's show, depending on the training schedule down there, so he can reflect on seeing this team in action for the first time in 2020. Make sure you're following all of our social media outlets at Soccer Down Here for your latest updates. We got your gear. You can go to the website, get your link to the Teespring site. You can also get your hats or beanies or scarves sent to you, or you can reserve it, pay for it, and pick it up at our next event. Send us a message. Let us know what you are interested in. The hats have been a popular item. The beanies have been very popular, and they are in low numbers. And the scarves are actually in a pretty low number, and we had a pretty large stock of scarves, too. It's all moving pretty quick, and it helps us grow the show, grow what we're doing, like adding a high school game of the week. And that starts next Tuesday, the first week of the Georgia high school season. We will be following one of the state champs from 2019. North Gwinnett will be up at North Gwinnett for their first home opener of the season. All kinds of things coming, all kinds of things today, all kinds of things the rest of the week. We'll be back in the morning. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.